Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's Monday morning and you've tuned in for the news to find out what's happening in Retardanistan. And to be honest, well, much of the same. Now, before we get on to the main video of today, can I again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. So let's get on to what I think is one of the most interesting news stories. It's actually around the crime statistics. Every time the crime statistics come out, I generally pay attention to them. I'm pretty sure you do too, because South Africa is not always classed a very safe place. Now, we have an acting police minister. Never forget that the reason we have an acting police minister is because the actual police minister is currently up for investigation with the Criminal Capture Commission. Anyway, the acting police commissioner said that the murder rate fell 3.7% in Q3 2025, and that overall violent crime fell by 6.7%. The murder decrease equated to 602 fewer murders versus the same quarter in the prior year. Now, over a 2-year period, what that actually meant is that murder was down by 17.6%. That was 1,359 fewer murders than there had been before. Now, the total contact or violent crime was down 6.7% versus the same period last year, down 8.3% over the last 2 years, with a provincial pattern now emerging, and that is that double-digit murder declines have occurred in KZN, Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Free State, and Northwest. Smaller declines are being seen in the Western and Eastern Cape, with slight increases in Limpopo and the Northern Cape. Now, of the 30 worst murder rate precincts, only 15 recorded decreases, with gang violence in the Eastern Cape and Western Cape remaining, well, pretty much high. And we know that because many of those areas are now being flagged as, well, points of no return in terms of the crime rates. Now, there was other interesting stats which showed that actually police officers were now being killed in greater numbers before. We had 23 killed in the last quarter, with nearly 80% being off duty. What's not being said there is how many of those are actually like police officer related or just police officers doing stupid things that lead to them being killed, such as, I don't know, fights at a nightclub. Now, firearms were identified as the primary weapon in robbery, murder, and organized crime, with renewed focus being on removing illegal firearms and preventing diversion of legal ones. That's basically the state selling legal firearms to, I don't know, someone. Now, a lot of the decreases in crime are being attributed to re-resourcing. That comes with the news that apparently an additional 999 detectives had been added over the past year, and that meetings with premiers and provincial safety heads are set for the 6th of March in order to get, well, more police officers. Who knew if you wanted to solve crime in the country, just get like more police? Like, okay, pretty sure we could have all saved you a lot of consultancy money and just told you that ourselves. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the crime statistics. Do let me know if you feel super happy about the reduction in violent crime and the reduction in the murder rate, or whether you think that possibly maybe the stats aren't actually telling the full picture, and potentially maybe they're just not accurate. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, moving on to some other interesting news. Now, you will recall I did a video around the Palestinian curriculum that was due to come in the Western Cape. Well, the ACDP in the Western Cape sought clarity from the Western Cape Educational Minister, David, after engagement by the ACDP MP, and that's Fallon Christians, who I think I've had on this channel before. In any case, the Western Cape Education Minister confirmed that the Palestinian curriculum is not approved for implementation in public ordinary schools in the Western Cape, and that public schools remain bound by the national CAPS, which was implemented by the Western Cape Educational Department. Now, the Palestinian-focused program is described as limited to independent Islamic schools choosing supplementary religious or cultural content aligned with constitutional provisions. Now, the statement cites constitutional protections, freedom of religion and association, and the right to establish independent educational institutions. So yes, you have to understand that because of freedom of religion and the right to establish your own independent educational institution, This curriculum is going to come in, just not to the general public, according to the Western Cape Educational Minister. Rather, it's just going to be limited to some jihadi training grounds. I don't know, that's kind of what they're implying. Now, the ACDP says that it will safeguard educational neutrality in public schools and will resist politically sensitive curriculums without any form of due process, transparency, or compliance. So, yeah, they said they're going to monitor this to ensure that your kids don't get indoctrinated with the jihadis. Talking of the jihadis, it would be wrong to not look at the King David tennis saga. Now, you will recall that King David and Reddam had a fallout because Reddam refused to play a tennis match supposedly connected with Jews. This was classed as an anti-Semitic incident. Now, the principal of that school resigned, and now, in the latest news, the board chairperson has also stepped down. Now, a Change.org petition by some parents actually criticized the apology given by Reddam to King David. This came after King David actually accepted the apology. Now, Reddam reportedly made no contact with King David after apologizing, despite saying that it would keep working with King David to reschedule a match. Very interesting, because that was apparently the nature of the apology. We're sorry for what we did. Let's actually have that match after all. And they've just gone quiet with loads of people just resigning. But it's important to understand that some of the individuals who made the stink about the match in the first place are still making a stink about it. And that may be why they're keeping their distance. The IRR Sarah Gond argues that the resignation stems from mishandling the issue earlier, making the school appear evasive and uncertain and triggering heavy pressure. And this itself is a key important element. You have to remember that when the whole incident came to the public light, the school denied that it occurred, and then said maybe it had occurred, but you just misunderstand. And then it was like, no, you understood perfectly, and actually it did happen in the way that it did, and everybody just had started resigning and falling on their sword. So what do we learn from all this? Well, they should have just stuck to the guns in the first place and just said exactly what had gone on and just take it from there. So remember that Change.org petition that I drew reference to? Well, that petition actually says that the apology given didn't actually make clear what the actual issue was, and that the apology seemed to just talk about anti-Semitism and political dissent, but actually really what it was all about is Zionism in Israel, and they were just trying to combat the Israeli occupation of Palestine or something. There's just no logic with these individuals. You cannot argue with retard. I've said that numerous times. In any case, the board of Reddam is trying to redeem itself and basically says the cancellation of the actual tennis match was taken without their board knowledge or approval and didn't reflect the wider constituencies, and says that rebuilding trust with the school itself needs transparency, accountability, and consistency, and that a rematch is still pending. And apparently the ball is still in Reddam's court, but as I already said, Reddam is now silent and is not actually engaging with King David. Is that because they're trying to stabilize themselves and stop everybody jumping ship? Or is that because they're worried about the pressure from their parents, which led to the cancellation of the tennis match in the first place? I don't really have the answer to that. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. So let's talk about some retardation with the president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Well, Cyril Ramaphosa has paused the implementation of the NHI Act. Yeah, inshallah, great. Now, Cyril Ramaphosa undertook in writing to attorneys, this is attorneys from all the challengers that have taken him to court for challenging the NHI Act, that he would not promulgate any sections of the NHI Act until the Constitutional Court rules on 2 public participation-related applications. Now, there are 2 matters. There is an appeal of a High Court order to provide the full decision record to the Board of Healthcare Funders, and that's the full decision record on why the act was signed in the first place, and the Western Cape government's challenge alleging that the public participation process was flawed and rushed, and it had been rushed through the National Council of Provinces. Now, the Concourt's hearing is scheduled for the first week of May. So if you think that this pause is going to be like forever, it's kind of a short-term pause. Now, reports note that this is the first time that Cyril Ramaphosa and the health minister moron have made an undertaking to temporarily halt the implementation, because you must remember that Minister Moron for the longest time says, yeah, I know this is all subject to court actions. Yeah, I know this is terrible. Yeah, but I'm just going to do what I want because, like, yeah, then NHI is great. Like, yeah. Now, the challenges to the NHI so far are, like, really quite substantial and include Solidarity, the Western Cape Government, the SA Private Health Practitioners Forum, SOCLIFA, the Hospital Association, and the Health Funders Association. But as per usual, the ANC, up until now, really hasn't given a damn and just said they were going to get on with it. But now, Cyril Ramaphosa, because of all the court action, says, actually, maybe we'll just hang 10. Now, as we're talking about Cyril Ramaphosa, it would be wrong to not talk about BEE, especially given my video on Friday around Cyril's approach to all of those who criticize BEE, because the DA and the ANC are clashing over BEE, and this came after the SONA debate. Now, Ramaphosa criticized the DA's anti-BEE stance, and Stevenage replied that the DA won't back down on the DA's stance relating to BEE. I'm reminded that there have been numerous BEE regulations circulated by the Agricultural Ministry since John took over. But anyway, that's another matter entirely. Now, Ramaphosa's message was that the economy is improving and that critics are dismissive of BEE, and he argues that the Constitution requires redress for past injustices and BEE is part of that. And he defended BEE against claims that it benefits only a few and that it inhibits growth and enables corruption, all things that have been provable in the economy time and time again with independent studies. But don't let independent studies hit you in the face. Now, apparently, according to Cyril Ramaphosa, any growth that we're currently experiencing in the economy is linked directly to BEE. I'm pretty sure nobody else is saying that, but, them president and his crazy ideas. And he argued that what we should really do is actually make BEE more effective and not abandon it. And he cited income and poverty trends and stats between 2006 and 2023 and emphasized that the remaining income gulf between white and black households needs to be bridged, and that BEE should be seen as an investment in the economy, and that he was going to announce a review of the existing BEE framework to support transformation and inclusive growth. Now, Steven's response was that the DA rejects BEE as protecting politically connected elite. The DA has tabled an economic inclusion for all bill, and that it will push to replace BEE with poverty-focused alternatives while staying in the GNU to drive reform from within. Now, I want to talk about that income disparity between the two, because in other news, the income disparity between white and black households have really shrunk, and they're not really there anymore. Apparently, they have narrowed, specifically in key sectors. Black individuals and white individuals, where they're doing the same job, are now apparently paid the same. Now, it's important to recognize that Cyril Ramaphosa's statistics actually went back to 2023, so this looks a little bit like he's selectively applying statistics, but Eddie, what do I know? Cyril, he knows them stuff. He knows something that clearly I don't, like how to stuff money in the sofa. But that's just my opinion. Now, if you really want to look at glowing indictments of South Africa and the current South African economy, you must look at AngloGold, because AngloGold has now reported a near crippling in its first year profit, driven by record gold prices and higher production. Now, why is AngloGold important? Well, that is because AngloGold sold its last South African mines in 2020 and then moved its primary listings to New York and London, and it's expanded into the Americas and operates across multiple countries now, which include Australia, Ghana, Tanzania, New Guinea, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Brazil, and Egypt. Notice that this company was actually founded in South Africa, no longer works in South Africa, and would you know it, record profits, 3 times the normal profit in these other territories. Now, do not for one second think that other companies that may be experiencing similar issues to what AngloGold has historically experienced will not be looking at and asking a fundamental question, that is, would it be better to re-domicile our listing to another territory? Pretty sure that's going to happen. It's going to have a detrimental impact on the South African economy. Anyway, there's a couple other news items I'm just going to leave you very quickly with. And that is that Bill Gates sold all of his Microsoft shares. And this comes after he was fingered in that list. You know that list in America that some well-known people have all been found in? Well, Bill Gates was found in it, and he's now selling all of his Microsoft shares because news is he may be going to prison. Who knows? In other news, Grace Mugabe fears being arrested if she ever returns to South Africa. And this comes days after one of Robert Mugabe's other sons were arrested in Johannesburg for shooting his Reddam boy. So yes, what you're typically seeing with the Mugabes is exactly what we see with many legacy dictators from Africa. Many of them that were struggle leaders. Well, the family that comes after are generally pretty horrendous, and we've even seen that in the Mandela family. And a final news article, well, students are all protesting again because they all want free university. And we're seeing this currently in Wits. So apparently Wits has got loads of protests going on, and would you know it, we're also seeing it in the Nelson Mandela municipality, where at Nelson Mandela University, they're also protesting. Now, I was really interested to know what free university looks like, because according to an EFF student command post, apparently some students owe over 150,000 Rand, and the demand is to, just write the debt off. I don't know who's going to pay for it, but apparently we're just going to write it off. Now, Wits have said that they've allocated over 20 million Rand for the Registration Assistance Fund to try help some students that owe money. But the level of debt owed to many of the country's educational establishments is just such that you couldn't write them off. But in typical fashion, the protesters do what protesters do and burn down the establishments so that eventually they won't have to pay back the money, but they also won't have universities to study at. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's the news of this morning. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until next time, bye.